I have a couple of questions I want to ask you about education. I'm sorry if I put you in on the spot, by asking hard questions. But my first question is, what would you say COVID has exposed when it comes to our education system?
Yeah,
Uh, what is your take on this?
right. So, I mean, I think COVID has really, you're right to ask the question, Amma, because I think COVID has really exposed several of the flaws that we have. And of course, I think it's worse if you're a student taking the local curriculum or the national curriculum. I think there we actually have, I mean, what COVID has exposed is how much the inequalities in the education space are. But of course, to a large extent, those inequalities are driven by the inequalities that anyway exist in due to socio-economic circumstances, differences in our country. But you might not think of it at first glance, but even in the international space now, maybe we won't have the same inequalities in the international space as the local space, maybe because everyone thinks if a child can go to an international school, then they are not affected in the same way, they don't have the same socio-economic difficulties as a child going to a national school. Maybe that is so, but even then I feel that there are several flaws that COVID has exposed, even in, say, an international school. So one predominant one being, I think, it has exposed the inequalities in the standards maintained in the classroom. Now, if we, and I think that's a big one.
As a principal, okay, you have a group of students, right? And they may come from different backgrounds. But don't you think it is your responsibility to see that you deliver education to everyone fairly and in an equitable manner?
Completely.
Yeah, so you need to kind of balance it and ensure that there is no differences where your students are concerned. And I have seen that in you, the way you interact with the students. But I think you have an opportunity to do that because of the number of students that you have. Correct me if I'm wrong, you said somewhere around 40 or 50 at the moment. And therefore you are able to do that. I thought of just interjecting at that time, but please do go on.
I mean, I agree again with you that, I mean, we should do our best as educators to make sure that every student who comes into our schools should receive the same standard of education. That's not quite what I meant when I said inequalities in standards. I mean, I agree with you. We have to, but when I talk of inequalities in standards in the classroom, I mean, if you take a step back and see how we maintain those standards are based first and foremost on the caliber of the teacher. It's also based on the quality control, if you like, and the standards maintained and the checking that is done by the school in terms of what is delivered in the classroom. It is also the standards come about as a result of, say, the teaching methodologies and practices that are adopted by teachers in the classroom. And also, as we go on, how do teachers continue to maintain standards, continue to deliver? So, are they up to date? And, there are number of questions that perhaps we need to consider in the teaching space. Number one, if we talk of, I mean, breaking what I said down a little bit more, and let me just pose these questions. Number one, are teachers suitably qualified? Sometimes teachers are hired to deliver a particular subject, but are they necessarily trained for that particular international curriculum? Now, that might not always be the case. right? Very sadly, sometimes there are teachers who only have, say, an A-level qualification, who who are not, say, who don't have a degree, perhaps, right? So do they have, and you know, okay, so if it is I think it depends on what level of child they're dealing with. If you're dealing with, say, a kid in nursery, I mean, and if I think then the biggest criteria you need is not how much of what kind of a qualification you have. I think what's more important is that you have a really caring disposition and you really have a love for kids. But for example, you go up the ladder, you go up to A levels or O levels. To teach a certain subject and take a child through to exams, then there is a huge difference between what someone with a degree and without a degree will deliver. You might have a brilliant A-level student who has wonderful knowledge. They may even have topped the country, but there is a little edge that perhaps someone with a degree can offer in the classroom. Again, as I said, are they trained in that particular curriculum? Because each curriculum, each subject within that curriculum has its little quirks, and there are certain things you need to produce the results. Also industry experience, because industry experience, it's not, a lot of teachers complete their degrees and go straight into teaching, but if they have industry experience, they have an edge, such teachers, because
Definitely.
you can actually make the lessons come to life. And also, if certain curriculums, for example, now ours is a fully Cambridge school. If you take the Cambridge curriculum, the better marks are awarded for the child who actually demonstrates that they have mastered the subject and truly understand what they're doing. Now that, and there's a huge focus on applicability of what you're learning. Now, if the teacher themselves has industry experience, then they are better able. I'm not saying that a teacher who has only got a degree is not capable of it, but you're improving your chances of delivering content which is applicable in the classroom if you if you have industry experience as a teacher. Then what kind of a classroom do you teach? Are you a teacher who stands at the very old school, you walk into class, you deliver whatever, put it on the board, and you're out of there? Or are you a teacher who's going to facilitate an interactive session? And now, given that we are online, how good are you at flipping learning and getting the kids to debate, to come up with ideas, to take responsibility for the learning? For that you need teachers who are empowered, because the more empowered they are, and that comes back down to the training and the support that they have from the school establishment as well, because the empowerment then makes them more able to adapt to unexpected and challenging circumstances, such as the ones we are faced with right now. And going back to your original question of what are the flaws that COVID has exposed, I think again it's another one of a lack of understanding of child psychology and how best to conduct online classes in a way that you make sure that students absorb the material. Also resilience, because kids are isolated. They've been isolated for quite some time now, and it is tough for them. And we have to understand that there might be some anxiety, there might be some depression. How do we keep them motivated to keep up their A game? How do we support the kids? There's a whole plethora of I think flaws that COVID has exposed. Interestingly, very interestingly, when I switched on my phone this morning, I caught an article on Facebook written by an old childhood friend of mine, Dr. Nisha Talagala. I mean, she's a brilliant mind. She's someone who has made, done so much in the field of AI, artificial intelligence. She was accepted to into a degree program at the age of 13. That's how brilliant Dr. Palagala is. And she'd written this
Are you
article.
speaking about, are you referring to Indrani Talagala?
Nisha Talagala, Dr. Nisha Talagala. She's based in the US. And you know, she had written this lovely article where, you know, she talks about, you know, the impact of COVID, you know, the fact that, you know, there is no going back. You know, she hasn't, of course, touched on the education space, but I found that article really interesting because a lot of her ideas, you know, I talk about, but related to education. And, you know, and what she said is the only thing that is going to keep us you know, ahead of the curve, ahead of the, you know, automation, ahead of the robots and the machines, and how we are going to continue to survive is with that, you know, literacy in AI or the digital literacy, and also continued learning. And to a large extent, maybe even continued learning online. Because, you know, the pandemic is not a blip. And I don't necessarily think that we can just, with the day it's over, say we can get back. I mean, I think this is, you know, it's a very new normal, which we are going to have to live with.
You know, another interesting point that you brought up, you said it has exposed the whole education system. Now, my next question is, again, I'm trying to put you on I may put you on the spot, but, you know, you spoke about a lot about the student, you know, focused on the student. But my question is, what about the teacher? You spoke about the teacher as well, but do you have certain KPIs, you know, key performance indicators for teachers, you know, looking at their performance? In fact, teachers have to perform. They have a role to play. Post-COVID, did you look at KPIs for teachers? You're a lot of teachers. Did you review that? And
I think, I mean, I think the term KPIs we are more familiar with in the business space, but I think we do have to have standards in place in all schools to make sure the equivalent of KPIs for the education space. I think we have to have them if we are to guarantee and assure quality for our students. And I think sadly, something that we are lacking in Sri Lanka is the fact that, you know, we don't have an overall governing body for education for international schools. I mean, we have the Ministry of Education, but international schools sadly don't really come under them. And when I say it's not so much about bringing international schools under the Ministry of Education, what I really have in mind is have a governing bodies, for example, Ofsted in the UK, so that which will ensure where, you know, schools are inspected regularly, so that we can make sure that the same standard is provided from school to school. At the moment, what happens is that it is down to each school, right? And
now you come under the Cambridge education, I don't know, system or whatever call it. But do they have certain kind of guidelines to check about your delivery of your education?
There are certainly, and we do have, you know, Cambridge has its own, you know, own set of, you know, quality guidelines, and, you know, there's a lot of support that we get from Cambridge to make sure that these standards are maintained. And I think in terms of, you know, whether your school is classed as an exam center, for example, or, you know, all that, for example, if you know, there are certain criteria for each school. So, and Cambridge does do a lot. There is a lot of guidance out there, but still for all, you know, they can provide guidance. They do their part to make sure as far as possible we maintain those standards. But there is still room for improvement. And what I mean, what would be nice now, a classic example is in how exams were conducted during, this last May, June exam. And, there were differences still in standards, so to speak. It was, the nitty gritty of it, the finer points were down ultimately to each school.
So, Shalika, my next question is about, what what have we learned from COVID that we could use to improve the education system, particularly in your school? Let's talk about your school. What have you learned through these last 1.5 years that you could improve? And maybe you can use this opportunity to speak to us as parents. We have children. We are wondering where to put our children, whether we should move our children out of the present school. So that it could be something that we can take out of this your question. And maybe there are parents out there who are reconsidering the whole
interestingly, I had a parents meeting a couple of days ago, and I was speaking to my existing parents. There was this one major concern amongst them, which is whether we would be opening up. Now the government has been talking in terms of, that they may be opening up. And what the assurance that I gave our parents was that we would not. Because for me, safety comes first. And I think that is something that we really have to consider. Because the kids are not vaccinated right now. This is in the short term. Kids are not vaccinated, and right now to bring them back would, I think, be courting disaster. And a lot of, as a school, I think we also have to not think of kids as just statistics, but, they are, when a parent enrolls that child into I'm speaking of my school. If a parent enrolls a child into my school, that student then becomes my responsibility, and their health has to come first. Now, the advantage, I think, now, as you know, Amma, we are a smaller school and we keep it that way. We give parents a guarantee that we will never have more than 10 kids to a teacher in a class. And we've continued to maintain that, and we will continue to maintain that. And I think that has given us an advantage because of the smaller number as well. And of course, because of the way that we have, we conduct our teaching online, we are actually able to convey the content to the kids and provide them with a comprehensive program in spite of being online. Now, everyone seems to see technology as a barrier. The fact that we have to conduct classes online is considered a barrier. I believe in flipping that mindset and seeing it the other way around, and seeing technology as more of an enabler. So I think, and of course, when COVID, you asked the question of what have we learned? 1 year ago, you and I spoke at that time as well, I remember. When we were first getting used to the pandemic. And at that point, actually, COVID, to be honest, COVID caught us unawares. But, we did put a lot of thinking into how we should deliver our material. And, we went in for anyway, we were following sort of more constructivist ideas in our classroom. It was never the traditional way of teaching. But being thrown in at the deep end, and having to conduct classes online actually helped to push us further in how we deliver. And we actually came up with a system which we actually implemented before lockdown last October. So we actually had the kids get used to the system, so that whether we went online or whether we stayed physical, the kids were getting the same thing, and there was no difference, and we've been able to introduce flipped learning into the classroom. We have a different sort of 30-30-30 schedule, that we implement as well. We call it that. But that really helps it helps to make sure that the kid stays focused. They don't have brain fatigue, and even our exam candidates or even the younger ones, they are able to absorb, we are able to continue with the curriculum. And of course, we are making constantly. We are keeping up with the trends, keeping up with the changes. I mean, there have been certain practices that we introduced several years ago, which we keep re-evaluating it in terms of, how should we best prepare the kids for university or for the job market. Our purpose is when a kid leaves CSA, they need to be prepared for the next part of the journey. And we have therefore, in terms of our extracurricular activities or how we do things at CSA, we've tried to drive in certain ways of doing things, or broadening their perspectives, giving them the skill set that they need to make sure that they are ready for that. And a lot of that actually still continues. I would have said we were ahead of the curve anyway before COVID, but COVID has just pushed us to do even better. And, we've just built on what we already had in place. And, we're going to keep reevaluating. At this stage, I'm very confident that, we have a very comprehensive digital program that can really, really give kids what they need for when they leave CSA. It also has its advantages, because recently a parent contacted me again, another parent, and they need to because the dad works abroad, and they need to travel. They need to travel to be with the dad. And the mom called me and said, will it be a problem? And I was like, no. I mean, we are online. Your kid can sign in. She can still do her exams. Everything can keep going. So this is what I mean when I say technology can be an enabler as well. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. We can still keep the program going. So, I mean, I was quite delighted that we could afford, the rest of our kids are staying back in Sri Lanka, of course, but also during COVID, there was a kid who was stuck abroad in India. They couldn't get back. And, that child was able to, he's an exam candidate, he was able to continue right through. And of course, they have just managed to get back into the country. So, I think, there's a lot of flexibility that we have. And I think maybe that might be because we are small. And our kids continue.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry to interrupt and interject here. At the same time, we sociologists have a issue. We have a concern about the generation who is in front of a computer
Naturally.
monitor and learning, and we are wondering, okay, how will this socialization process take place for this particular child, right? You use the word digital technology and all that, and this is the very thing that concerns us as researchers in social
Naturally.
sciences. Yeah. So how
man is
you,
a social animal at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. How have you kind of used your system? I mean, do you have a system where you say child not only his or her subject through these online means, but do you have a process where children work together, do
Yes.
assignments together, or
of course. So the
study
working
together?
Yeah, working together on assignments still happens. I agree with you, and we're dealing with students and children, and at the end of the day, physical contact would be the best for any child's development. We cannot take that away from them. But right now we don't have a choice. So it's a case of making the most of the system. But I think on that front as well, we have a good system in place. So we do get, as part of the classroom time, we do get the kids during the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. There is group work, teamwork, coursework that is done together. That is in terms of the actual subjects that they have to sit for. So the students get to connect amongst themselves on Zoom or on WhatsApp and complete work together, do a lot of group work. That aspect is there. We also have the children connecting when it comes to extracurricular activities. So although we are not able to offer all our traditional extracurricular activities, such as, I mean, there is no chance of telling children, okay, get together and play a game of tennis, but or go swimming. But we do have extracurricular activities almost every single afternoon that we conduct online, including things like fitness. So there's ones like public speaking, which is, of course, easier to conduct online. But things even like fitness, we do have opportunities like that for the kids. We also have separately a buddy program that our alumni also are involved in and help us with, again, to help the kids connect during this time, because to try and make sure that they are not, we minimize the impact of the social isolation that we have no choice about at the moment.
Thank you very much, Shalika. I think we have come to the end of our interview. Thank you so much for giving us this time, and sure the viewers would have got a lot to think about